not in the finals, actually, everyone thinks it was the finals, but in the semifinal, to go to the final, to win the U.S. Olympic team a gold medal in ice hockey in 1980. If you ever go to St. Paul, Minnesota, the coach of that team, Herb Brooks, is a living, not a living, he's passed away now, legend. He's a god. To the Minnesotans. If you go outside the state capitol, there's a huge golden statue of Herb Brooks, this coach, this icon that did the unthinkable, led the team, Team USA, ice hockey, 1980, to win the gold medal against all odds, an extreme underdog. For those of you who don't know Olympic ice hockey that well, it would be like the Bears playing basically anyone this season. Like the Bears playing the Chiefs or something like that, all right? So a huge underdog, right? And so, yeah, exactly, the Lions. And so, I didn't want to rub it in, you know? And so, Herb Brooks became such an icon, especially in the state of Minnesota, but really for all Americans, because he did the absolute unthinkable, right? He gathered a bunch of amateur hockey players, college athletes, which, if you know the sport of hockey, college hockey is not even the most elite amateur hockey source. Really, it's juniors, especially in the 80s. He gathers all of these decent to mediocre amateurs from, BC and Minnesota and Michigan, and gets them together to go and somehow try to win a gold medal for their country. And they go out and they are horrible. They go and play exhibition games and they get beat and battered and outscored. But their coach somehow, Herb Brooks, finds a way to unite them. He finds a way to improve them. And he finds a way to make them champions. And there's many reasons we could focus on as to why Herb Brooks was able to do this in 1980. But perhaps the greatest reason is because he had a mantra of no excuses. When the team actually lost in an exhibition game, I think to Latvia, they were coming off the ice, he told the entire team, stop, go back onto the ice. We're skating laps. And he had them skate laps and laps. He had them skate so late that the arena's sexton came up and said, we got to turn the lights off. And Herb said to him, oh, that's just fine. Turn the lights off and leave the key for me. I'll lock up. No excuses. Right? And when the team went into the qualifying rounds, they won some and lost some. They faced injuries, but he made no excuses. And perhaps the pinnacle moment, an hour before Team USA went on to play Team Russia, the Red Army, in the semifinal, he gave them a speech for the ages and conveyed to them this same message of no excuses. He made this team into a champion, a group of amateurs playing professionals. Belief in themselves by having them uphold that very same mantra themselves. That to be successful, to be a champion, to do the unthinkable, in their case, on a sheet of ice, must mean that we have to have the mentality, the mantra, the phronima of no excuses. And this message of not having excuses is exactly what our gospel lesson is about. This morning's gospel lesson, today's the 11th Sunday of Luke, is a parable. So Jesus is telling a story, right? And he's giving a story that's an image of the kingdom of heaven, right? And he says, a house owner is going to have a big banquet, And he invites all of those in his community, and a bunch of them have excuses. If you notice, their excuses aren't too bad. One bought some animals that he had to tend to. One just got married, like, what are you going to tell the wife? Sorry, honey, we'll have to pause the honeymoon. I got to go to this. They were decent excuses, but nonetheless, they made their own excuses as to why they couldn't come to the banquet. And so the owner of the home then says, go out and invite the poor, the needy. Go to every corner of the town and invite everyone to my banquet. And his servant does so and says there's still room available. And the master says at the very end, those who were invited and did not come will not enjoy the fruits of my banquet. They will not enjoy the bounty of my meal. And this image that Christ is telling us today in this parable is not about a dinner party. It's not about a game of ice hockey. It's an image for us about the kingdom of heaven. And the message, at least one message that Christ is conveying to us on this, the 11th Sunday of Luke, on this, the 15th of December, 10 days before Christ's nativity, is that in our lives, in our relationship with Christ, we are to also have no excuses. There's so many things in our lives that pull us in so many ways. There's so many stressors, so many priorities, like our children, grandchildren. There's so many cares of this life. And yet the Lord reminds us this morning, when it comes to his kingdom, in other words, when it comes to our relationship with Christ, in and through the sacraments, in and through our relationships, in and through the Eucharist, we also are to have no excuses for why we are not at that banquet table. And just like those who asked to be excused had excuses of substance, we too have things in our lives that are reasonably pulling us away from our relationship with Christ, right? Oftentimes, those things that get in the way of our relationship with Christ are good things. They're real things, real stresses, real concerns. And so this message of no excuses isn't simply anything that you have on your mind that distracts you from your relationship with Christ in your prayer life, in the sacramental life, and in the Christian relationships that you build around you are not bad things in and of themselves. The message this morning is rather that first, our priority must be our relationship with Christ. That first, if we want to be able to deal with the cares of this life, we must be grounded with our top priority being our relationship with Christ, having no excuses. Just like Team USA's focus for that year before their gold medal was on the task of becoming a team and becoming a champion, our task first in our life must be also building the spiritual muscles of virtue that draw us near to Christ in our relationship with him. So these last 10 days of Advent, before we step into the days of light between Christmas and Theophany, I encourage you to think about the excuses you might be making. Don't worry, I make them too, as it pertains to your relationship with Christ. What's that one thing you think you can't do in your relationship with him? Whether it's putting the phone down and spending a little more time in the scriptures, whether it's mustering up the courage to go to confession even though you know it's been too long, that's okay, don't worry. Or whether it's getting your family to church one of these Sundays, or inviting a neighbor or a loved one. Think about one way you too can cut out the excuses we want to be true champions, so to speak, in our spiritual life, we have to follow that same mantra of no excuses. May we focus our energy these last 10 days of Advent on our relationship with Christ. May we build up our relationship with him in and through the sacraments and all the tools of the church, and in doing so, find that victorious joy that we experience at his holy nativity. Amen. Please rise. Μετά φόβου Θεού